Serious. Have you ever known someone who wholeheartedly believed that they were Wolfkin a vampire etc. and couldn't handle the reality that they weren't when confronted? What happened to them? She cheated on her boyfriend occasionally, but would claim that it's not cheating because she would only do it during full moon, so it was her werewolf half doing it and not her. I knew a girl like this. Now she's an astrology nut that goes crazy at music festivals and cheats on her boyfriend when Venus is in Gatorade or some sh. My ex-boyfriend was certain he was a vampire. He kept going to churches, cemeteries, all those kind of places. I failed at bringing him back to reality. He died of cancer in January this year. Not the ending I was expecting. This isn't exactly what you're asking for, but it's similar. From 1st to 6th grade, I had this friend ally that genuinely believed she could see dead people and demons and whatnot. She would do the stereotypical vampire things, pretending to bite people, showing off her canines, talking about blood, etc. But that wasn't like her main thing. She had this one demon that she said followed her everywhere and hid in the bathrooms that we just called it. I always described it as being whiter than paper with 2 slits for a nose and sharp fangs. I wholeheartedly believed her because why wouldn't I? I was a dumb kid that wanted supernatural things to be real. And she was my best friend that had no reason to lie to me. I literally was too scared to use the restroom at school because she said that it always peeked over the stall. As the years went on, though, I eventually realized that she was making it up. But the conviction with which she said that kind of stuff was scary. I know her parents were going through a rough patch at the time, so I think she was just making it up for attention, which she got. I haven't talked to Lai in a while, but another friend of mine ran into her at a fair recently and said she seemed to be doing well. I'm glad things are better for her. I met a guy who was supposedly pretty close to the level in Scientology where you're supposed to develop powers like telepathy and stuff. Not sure what became of him. You'd think that once people reach this level and didn't have powers they'd quit. But brainwashing. I think some of it is the sunken cost fallacy. And some of it is gaslighting. The church might say you didn't do something right, or your conviction isn't strong enough. If you aren't getting what you thought you would out of it, you are doing it wrong. That sort of thing. Sometimes people follow the carrot way too long, thinking the truth is just around the next corner. Yeah. They had really severe childhood abuse trauma to contend with, and coped with it by believing they were psychic. We met in like junior high when they still believed this. Eventually, they realized that they weren't entirely wrong, just a little bit misdirected. They're a deeply empathic person who, thanks to their abuse history, is very good at reading facial expressions, body language, etc. They are actually a really wonderful person, and ended up becoming a social worker and volunteer at a domestic violence shelter, where all of the qualities that made them a good psychic make them great at helping others who are going through a difficult time. I hope this gets pushed to the top. A lot of kids like this really do come from traumatic upbringings that aren't always super obvious. Pairing a tumultuous household and bullying at school can be extremely difficult to cope with. And a lot of kids find comfort in identifying with fantasy characters or species or who are also traumatized. Think of a werewolf who has to hide from the public because he/she is a danger. Or fairies who are the last of their kind, etc. This story is so wonderful. Though, there are a lot of ways that people can learn to cope with and then utilize their past to benefit the world in some way. Unfortunately, those things usually take time, healing, and often therapy as well. If you still talk to this person, please let them know that this internet stranger is extremely proud. My best friend in high school and my first 2 years of college genuinely believed that she could not only speak to forestry, but that she was a wingless fairy. She would oftentimes, when we went walking her dogs, lean to trees and translate for me what the rustling of nature spoke of. She also would scribble in her books what she called new alchemy. Violently scribbled circles and void shapes she believed held magical and fey magic through her own powers. We had a falling out after a few years. After she moved to the other side of the country to be with her grandmother. We started talking about a few months ago and I found out she had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. She is currently on 2 types of medication and she told me her walks are depressingly quiet now. That made me sad. I hope she finds a balance between the 2 worlds. Unfortunately. Yes. I met a girl at a very young age while going to church. Her family was deeply religious. But in a messed up way. So we dated off and on. And after high school hit it off pretty strong. She honestly believed she was a fairy. She would get faced with the reality of not being a fairy and completely shut down. Found out later she has really bad schizophrenia and had to get away from her when I couldn't help her anymore. One of my closest friends that I lived with through most of college thought she had special powers. It was weird to say the least. She'd been bullied all her life and I always reckoned she'd developed this as a coping mechanism. The thing that really stood out to me though was that she was so good at getting people to play along with it and I have no idea how. I saw this scenario play out a few times during the time we lived together and I was always so confused as to how she kept getting people on board, so to speak. General scenario went like this: she'd meet someone and if she really liked them, then after a while she'd tell me in a very knowing sort of way that she thought they had the gift, aka they also had powers. She told me once she thought I had them and I just kind of smiled and nodded and said, "Okie dokie then." So then she'd get together for lunch or something with this person and she'd launch into this full-on spiel about how she was all that was standing between the world and destruction and she could tell that they were all so special and she needed someone to help her fight these battles, not literal battles, more like astral projection type battles, and help her guard the gates. Hilarious side note. The gates were colored cyan, magenta, yellow and black. She got mad at me one time when I referred to them as the printer gates. And you'd think that after unloading all that people would run screaming, but they didn't. They'd show up at our apartment to talk to her and they'd be talking about these battles and stuff. All I can figure is she was good at spotting people with overactive imaginations who didn't fit in well. She probably would have made a great cult leader tbh. She now works in it and we still talk to each other pretty regularly. She wrote a fantasy novel that she's trying to get published, which was actually quite good when she let me read the draft. I'm guessing that became the outlet for her stories when she grew up, so to speak. I kind of want to ask her about what was going on with her. But I kind of don't want to open that can of worms ever again. When she wasn't in full on WTF mode, she was the most kind and genuinely fun to be around person. I'm sort of afraid the printer gates will rear their ugly head again if I bring it up. Not exactly the same as otherkin, but very much in the vein of the question in terms of total reality denial. I know someone who totally, wholeheartedly, believes that they are a Jedi Master. Our families go way back, so I happen to know other kids were merciless to him all through childhood. He's always had problems, though. Kind of one of those people you can feel aren't quite right but not exactly why. He decided he was a Jedi Master one day. Just like out of the blue. Credit where credit is due. He went all the way with it. Became a minor nerd celebrity for a while. At first when people challenged the Jedi thing, why don't you have powers then? He'd say Jedi is a mindset, not a power. Or sometimes you don't know the powers I may have, and try to play it off like a joke. But the dude was 100% serious. If you pushed he would outright melt down with tears and screaming. Apparently his parents financially supported him pretty much entirely. Until he, and this part confuses the crap out of me, got married and had a kid while still insisting on the Jedi thing. After that the wife supported him. Eventually he got tired of that and left his family to take off with a teenager he met at a convention. That's when we cut ties with him. You can be a Jedi all you want, but cutting and leaving your kid as some Sith Lord If the kind ends up a Star Wars fan, there might be a really weird I am your father moment. How TF am I single and these people getting married and having kids? Maybe there are some powers there. When I was in the US Navy, we had this dude who thought he was a wolf in a human body. He would howl at the moon and just be generally strange. I knew someone that had served with him before me at a different command who said he had to be forced by medical to shower. When asked why he wasn't showering, he told them it would wash away his scent and he wouldn't be able to attract a mate. I don't know what happened to him. My former friend Mark, who ran around at night naked thinking he was a werewolf. He stopped when he was shot in the bottom by a paranoid farmer. Small town thought Mark had too much time and energy, and so they had him join the football team. I don't think he runs around naked anymore. But he works as a vet and helps raise wolves. My cousin. She 100% believed she was a werewolf. She was finally diagnosed with schizophrenia and bipolar years ago. She's doing a lot better now. Knew a guy that swore that he was a reincarnated kitsune spirit. He and I got into an argument one day and he swore that he would destroy my life. Because kitsunes never let go of grudges. Mythologically, kitsunes were described as being especially capricious. He ended up telling a bunch of lies about me to everyone he could. Gaslit another friend into cutting off contact with me. And occasionally I'll run into someone online that fell for one of the many stories he made up about me. I actually went to high school with a lot of people like this who eventually grew out of it. I remember one girl specifically because, based on her Facebook, she has not grown out of it. She claimed she had multiple personalities. Her main two being herself and the other being a 200-year-old British vampire. We live in the US and she would put on a British accent and everything. It seems she has found a partner just like her though, and they are planning a pretty extravagant vampire wedding. Good on them.